Autumn has arrived and there's nothing like a warm bowl of ramen to end the day. Today I'm excited to share with you my vegan ramen recipe from start to finish, and that's including the broth, the tare, which gives the broth its umami flavour, toppings, and a couple of different flavour variations. So let's get cooking. Firstly, we're going to make that aromatic broth, and it's going to start with some spring onions, half of which we're going to finely slice for the garnish, and I'm going to put them in some ice to keep them nice and cool and fresh. The other half I'm going to finely chop. The broth we're making today isn't going to be cooked for hours on end, so I'll show you a few tips to get maximum flavour in a short amount of time. Starting with some coriander seeds, which I'm going to lightly bash to release their lemony fragrant aroma. We're going to fry the coriander seeds in nutty toasted sesame oil, and then once they start to sizzle, we're going to add the spring onions. Followed by some zested garlic. I've got an absolutely massive clove here, so I'm just going to do one, and zesting it really small is going to release the maximum flavour from it. Then we're going to add the ginger. Quick tip is to use a teaspoon to remove the skin. You don't have to remove it, but I want this broth to be nice and clear, so I will today, and then we're going to just zest it in like the garlic. Another way to prepare the ginger would be to cut it into thin little slices, and then it will release its aroma into the broth, but I find zesting it gives it the most pungent kick of flavour, and we'll just fry this for a couple of minutes now. So this is kombu, or dried kelp. It's a type of seaweed, and it comes dried in either these knots or in strips, and I've just been soaking it for about an hour, and it's going to give the ramen a beautiful, rich, salty umami flavour. It does kind of taste like the ocean, but in a good way in my opinion, but if you don't want to use it, then feel free to leave it out. Add in your kombu plus the water it's been soaking in. We'll then add some dried mushrooms. I'd usually use shiitake, but I could only get porcini today, and then we'll add the rest of the water. Bring your broth to a boil or let it simmer for 15 to 20 minutes to allow all the fragrant flavours to come out of the vegetables and spices. Then I like to remove the kombu, as I don't like the broth to be overpowered by the seaweed flavour, and we'll let the broth sit while we get the rest of the ingredients ready. Starting off, we're going to make some delicious sesame and soy grated tofu. Simply grate a block of extra firm tofu. We'll then add sesame seeds, soy sauce, toasted sesame oil, a little bit of maple syrup, and some arrowroot powder. Give it a good mix until all the ingredients are combined. I'm going to air fry it for around 15 to 20 minutes on 200 degrees until it's sticky and golden. You could also fry it or roast it in the oven if you like. You could also do cubes of tofu for your ramen, but I really like how this grated tofu goes super sticky and crispy. Next, we're going to prepare some pak choi. I'm going to simply cut it in half, and we're going to pan fry it in some sesame oil until slightly charred. You could use any greens in your ramen, such as spinach, kale, or spring greens would all work really well. I like to use pak choi as it has a nice crunch and a slightly mustardy flavour, which goes great with the other ingredients. Once you've got a nice char on it, we're going to turn it over, add a sprinkle of salt and a splash of water. We'll then put a lid on and let it steam for a few minutes. You want it to be soft on the outside but still have a slight bite to it. I love to use dried shiitake in ramen as they've got a really intense flavour, but I could only find some fresh ones today, which will still be good, but not quite as strong. To prepare these, I'm going to tear them into little pieces, and then we're going to fry them over a really high heat to get a nice char on them. And we're also going to use a little bit of sesame oil as well. That gives a really nice nutty flavour. I'm going to be a little bit naughty here and add some vegan butter. I just think cooking mushrooms in butter is the best way to go, and it gets them beautifully golden and brown. So once they're looking like this, you can put them aside, and we're going to make the tare, which starts with some mirin and some sake going into a small saucepan. A key ingredient in this tare is going to be miso, and I'd highly suggest going to an Asian supermarket and getting yourself a big tub like this, as it's going to be much cheaper, much nicer than the stuff you get from the supermarket. Whisk in your miso. We're then going to bring it to a boil and let it simmer for a few minutes to cook out the alcohol. As an alternative to the mirin, which is very sweet, you could use some maple syrup or agave, and then for the sake, which is very acidic, you could use some rice wine vinegar. So that's your tare done, and that is going to be the seasoning for your ramen. You could add this directly to the broth, but by doing it separately, we can make different flavours of ramen. To start, we'll just make a standard ramen, starting with a couple tablespoons of the tare, and then we're going to pour in a couple ladles of the broth. Whisk it in, you can then taste it to adjust the seasoning, and then we're going to add our toppings. Starting with some noodles, which I've just cooked to the packet instructions, -1 minute, as they're going to cook more in the hot broth. Then I'll add another ladle of stock, followed by the pak choi, mushrooms, bean sprouts, and some sweet corn. I'm keeping it fairly simple for toppings today, but you could add chili oil, garlic oil, crispy onions, nori. There are so many different options, it's totally up to you. I totally forgot to add that delicious tofu, but I do add it later on when I go to taste it. So we're going to make a couple of different variations now, starting with a peanut butter and gochujang. It's going to start with a couple tablespoons of the Tare, then a big tablespoon of peanut butter, some gochujang, and then I would add lime juice, but sadly I didn't have any, so I just went for some lemon juice. Gochujang is a Korean chili paste and is going to go perfectly with that creamy peanut butter, which will help offset the spiciness. Once again, we're going to pour over the broth and adjust the seasoning, and then you can add on your favourite toppings. Then we're going to do a creamy tahini one, which starts with some Tare for the seasoning, then the tahini, then some soy milk or any plant milk of your choice, and a touch of maple syrup to counter the bitterness of the tahini. You'll then whisk this together and slowly add the stock, as there is a risk of the tahini splitting, so you want to add it really slowly so that the temperature slowly rises. With the milk, make sure to use a full fat one so it's nice and creamy and it doesn't split. Something like oat, almond or soy works perfectly. I'm terrible at using chopsticks. I should probably watch a YouTube video on how to use them properly. The tofu is amazing. I think I'm going to swap to spoon, might be a little bit easier. Oh yeah. You really can't beat a warm bowl of ramen, now that the weather is turning a little bit chillier. The broth is lovely and fragrant but has a rich umami flavour, and then you've got the sticky, salty tofu on top, the fresh vegetables, and it's just a lovely bowl of ramen. If you're looking for another comforting meal, then check out this video.